How are we doing, Kansas Jayhawks fans? This is your host, Nick Rondeau, bringing you some Jayhawks Daily content. And, we talk about what's going on next season. We're talking about, some potential announcements or commitments coming up, some, off the court things that are going on with KU basketball, just all KU basketball content we can get our hands on. And we're going to, of course, mention Talon Kinney again because he's the only recruit we've got for 2026 right now. Keyword only. And if you remember what Talon Kinney said, he said, I know of one coming, and I know I'm going to get on the phone with Stokes. And so we brought up Stokes the other day, but he said, one is coming. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this week we're going to have October 1st at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Trent Perry is going to be announcing his commitment on CBS Sports College Basketball YouTube channel. That's where a lot of these people are doing their announcements, broadcasted through, obviously. We're just going to talk a little bit about Trent Perry. And he had his visit with KU back September 12th, and he got offered in August. But, that's beyond the point. So he's number 77 in the ESPN rankings. He's, I think, number 105 or something like that in 24/7 Sports. He's kind of like a positionless guy. He's like 6'4", but also listed, like 6'6" almost. He's got a 7'1" wingspan, so that should kind of tell you his length. And he plays at the Link Academy in Missouri, so he's got that nearby proximity that makes things a little bit interesting. But what really interests me about this guy is also he was on the MoKan Elite on the Nike EYBL circuit. A couple of Kansas alums that came out of that, Christian Brown and Ochai Abaji, obviously two great successes for KU, and they were also kind of similar to lower rated high school recruits that they turned into Jayhawk greats. So we can only hope that he could eventually be one of those guys. But what really is great for Trent and what's great for Bill Self potentially is this guy's length. And I've watched so many clips of him, just the instinct on defense to cut off a pass. Right when that ball hits the floor, he's poking it out. It's just you can tell he's got a great wingspan, but it's the intelligence that he has with these defensive plays. I mean, yes, he prides himself on being a defensive stopper. He has made it very clear. Defense is how I play my game, and that's Jayhawk basketball right there. That is Bill Self role player basketball. And yes, I say role player, and that's not to put anyone, he's a top 100 recruit, obviously. It's just that he's going to be very developmental. You've got to be focused on that kind of mindset. He's a 4-star, so obviously no schlub in itself, but he does need to make a little bit of strides. Shooting the basketball. From the EYBL, he shot 7% from three. 46 from the free throw line. Yes, very small sample size in numbers, but there's going to be a great opportunity from him to learn from players like Talon Kinney at the time, how you kind of develop. But, he's that positionless wing that can guard 1 through 4, I would even say 5. But, he is originally from Frisco, Texas. So that does kind of, lead us into our next issues is his top 3 schools. So he is announcing it's between the top 3. We've got KU, we've got Maryland, we've got TCU. And we're not going to rank any of those 3. I don't know where it is. We obviously know the best team. That's KU. But we're going to just kind of talk about a little bit about what he views each program bringing to him. And, when he talked about Kansas, what he kind of saw from them and what he maybe believes that they offer best is they want to see him develop. They really want to see him develop the shot and his handle. And, it makes sense. He's even, understanding of that. He's not a ball-dominant player on his team. He's a spot-up shooter typically. And, he creates so much transition points. And that's just what you love from any bench or role player, but just from any player, the instinct behind that. And he's also, mentioned about Kansas, loves the atmosphere, great atmosphere set there. That's, kind of with all great schools, but KU's got the best. Everyone knows, even in Andy Katz, love Andy Katz college basketball content. He even mentioned Allen Fieldhouse as his number 1, atmosphere to play in. So always good to look at that. But he said he's really excited if he goes there for the fact that it just seems like they love basketball. The environments are always incredible. He knows the things that they need to develop, and he knows exactly how well they can help people develop and get to the next level. And, we'll turn our sights to Maryland a little bit. And so with Maryland, he said when he went on the visit, he already had a good relationship with the coaches, which, that's a knock against, us, I guess. We just didn't have the relationship with him. He's in Missouri. Maybe we could have made a couple of recruiting trips, but maybe we already did, and maybe he's just underselling. I can't speak towards that, but he's also said he wanted to go see the school. He was intentional about taking all of his visits and everything along those lines. He also spoke kind of to the academic prestige of Maryland, and he knows he's not a one and done caliber type player at this point. So you have to consider those kind of opportunities. He said that the campus was beautiful, great academic school. He just felt like the staff and everything kind of really showed open arms to him, and that's what stood out to him. And to be honest, that doesn't ring I'm committing to Maryland bells, really. When you talk about the atmosphere and excitement to play in a school, I feel like that's kind of where you're leaning more towards. But again, I'm not putting us above Maryland on what he's going to choose. Who knows? Again, some people are saying this is a shoe-in. I'm not going to go that far, but I'm going to say I'm very open to the fact that I would love if he was a shoe-in. And then we'll talk about TCU, and this is probably, I would say, maybe the biggest competition. Maryland, is still there, but with TCU, him obviously being from Texas, that's going to be, a big connection there. He loves TCU. He loves, Tony Benford. He's been recruiting him since he was in ninth grade, apparently. So, obviously just a lot of familiarity being from the area. He's been on a bunch of unofficial visits there since it's literally in his backyard. This does trend in that direction. You're going to have that hometown pull for a guy like that. So, you can never really overshadow. Yes, the atmosphere is great. Yes, the brand is great. But he feels like that, it's very close. He's got the family feeling because of how close he is to it. So to speak on that, I really have to say, I think it's really a 2-horse race, maybe not 3. And I think, and if he picks Maryland, I look like an absolute fool. But it's impossible to rule out the fact that TCU, they've got great coaches there with, Jamie Dixon as well. They might have more opportunity for him there immediately. And that's not to, take away from TCU. TCU is a great program and produced a lot of, solid guards over the last couple of years. It's maybe more of an opportunity for him to shine immediately, whereas Kansas, it might be a little bit less opportunity right from the get-go. Who knows how much we're going to be. We do have at least 5 scholarships to offer for next season. It could be up to 7. So, there's plenty of opportunity for KU to get their paws on anybody they really love, they really want to develop. And I'm telling you, from the tape I'm seeing on Trent Perry, this guy is exactly who Bill Self would want to develop. I'd say when he's spot up, he's actually a great shooter. He really is. And beyond that, you can't teach defensive instinct like he has. He can pick off a pass on the weak side from 15 feet back. It doesn't matter. He times a ball perfectly on a steal. And his closeout speed is incredible. I mean, a three-point shot is not safe if he's anywhere near you. He can sag off his defender and go to the other one if he sees a three-point shot coming. I can't tell you how many blocks I saw on his highlight tape that were, not just pin downs, but closeouts. And that's what you love, because that's defensive effort. That's a motor. And, when a guy also says, I pride myself on that, I love how much of a defensive stopper I work on. And, yes, I also have to work on my scoring and my jumper. He'll make strides from that. He will be. But you can't teach defensive instinct. And that's one thing you don't have to do with this guy. So keep an eye out for Trent Perry coming up October 1st, CBS YouTube channel. But, we'll see what we've got to offer. And, we'll kind of do another little just – keep it in the kind of the guard convo. We got TK already, but there's a lot of great guards still available. And I think people are kind of, just because you get TK, people are kind of writing KU off for getting another guard in this class. And I think that's a little crazy, just because there are some great guards. And one of them is going to be Miles Sadler. And, kind of like what we mentioned when, we got Tony Bland. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like the Taj Ariza train's going to work out for us. He still has a strong West Coast connection, and he still, he's spent plenty of years out on the West Coast scouting for other programs, yes, but he was the guy in a lot of those, open door meetings or whatever you want to call them. He was on a lot of those visits, and the thing with Miles Sadler is he's kind of fits a similar mode to Nginyu Ngala that we just got for this year for a grad transfer. He's a 5'10" point guard. He's originally from Canada, so that's where the bells start ringing from there. But he played at Bella Vista Prep in Scottsdale, Arizona. He's ranked number 23 in the ESPN rankings. Plays for the Canadian national team because he's originally from Brampton, Ontario. So, I think the thing that really intrigues me about Miles is how fast paced he is and how he could be the easiest Harlem Globetrotter of all time. The ball is on a string with him. He could dribble circles around me or anyone that I know. I mean, he's just that talented with the ball. His quickness is really what sets him apart. He looks as quick as a De'Aaron Fox in the day. Dennis Smith Jr. at NC State. These guys who just have unbelievable first steps and still have the handle to keep the ball with them. So I think that's really what kind of stood out. I think a big plus also for him, he's got pretty solid shooting. A lot of he can work in transition, quick defender, but he's got a pretty solid stroke, which that's kind of what you're maybe not hesitant for, but you've got to work on that with some of these guys, and with him, I don't think you have to work on it too much. But his change of direction, his high pace, his speed, he does struggle a little bit to keep up with other faster guards. I saw some games where he really was getting kind of outpaced by them, and I don't think maybe that some of that comes from just his motor and running it so hard on the offensive end. But he's a very very quick hands, so that's going to play on the defensive end, quick steals and whatnot. But and another things to kind of keep out for him, and it looks like big game kind of experiences almost. Looking at his invitationals and tournaments from in the past years, he upset Montverde Academy, which is always just a dominant program with top recruits all around. These are where the Ben Simmons of the world, the D'Angelo Russells, these top guys went to, and they upset them. And right after upsetting Montverde Academy, they also took down Prolific Prep, who we've heard how many names from Kansas, specifically, but also just these other top 30 recruits playing there. Taking down Prolific Prep, where he put up 19 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, 2 steals. It seemed like it was going to be a generational run for them, taking down 2 powerhouses in a row for his Bella Vista's team. They did end up losing the next round, but they lost to the Boozer twins. Who will be running Duke's team entirely on their own this year. These guys are unbelievable talents. Yes, the sons of Carlos Boozer. So to put on a good run and kind of beat 2 powerhouses, 2 juggernaut teams, and then losing to an NBA legends twin sons who both go to Duke basketball the year ahead of you, I can't really go against you. You put up great numbers, you put up good stuff, but what is going to be difficult with him is the competition, like it is with every recruit. He had visits at Tennessee. He went to UCLA after that. UC Santa Barbara even, Oklahoma. He just has offers from all these schools: Mississippi State, Iowa, California, Syracuse is big, but he's also got some smaller ones. Like I said, Santa Barbara. He does seem like he might want to stay West Coast, but Weber State, Cal State, Northridge, Texas State. It seems like some of these smaller schools are really trying to pitch to him. You'll be our guy. You be a small guy at a small school, and be the story. How is Weber State not pitching? Give us the Dame Dalla experience. It just. These are things that Kansas can't quite offer. Yes, we have Talon Kinney, but how could you just overlook a talent like a Miles Sadler who is just faster than everybody else on the court and gives you another great option to kind of handle the load as an additional point guard. So I think these are things to kind of keep your eyes out. I know Bill Self's got him in his sights just in case. We had the offer back out. I think last August or whatnot, but or last December, excuse me. But never rule out Kansas Jayhawks. I don't care if they're out West Coast. I don't care if they're not talking about us. Never rule out the Jayhawks for getting, especially maybe another point guard in this class. So that is definitely something I wanna see. And last, we're kind of just talk about a little bit what's going on, kind of the good deeds, and kind of just the off court stuff that you guys may not be hearing about. That I got my nose to the grindstone, ear on the streets, everything hearing for you, and that's gonna be just come. Some commercials, some good deeds, some things that the KU guys are doing. And Darren Peterson and Bill Self, did a hilarious kind of commercial rendition for the Up All Night promotional kind of night that KU does, and it just kind of shows Darren Peterson's super fun personality, but also how much he buys into being a Jayhawk. And he's sleeping at Allen Fieldhouse. That's the whole thing. Bill says Darren Peterson's the kind of guy who never leaves the gym. First one in, last one out, and it's him reading the newspaper, waking up in the stands. He's a guy who never stops working and always grinds to the end. He's using a mop and buffing the floors. Doing just the things that. These are just a fun kind of, efforts to get the juices flowing. Yes, we got the number one recruit. We know he's going to the NBA, but we also want to just show a fun side of Bill Self. People don't always, see that. I mean, how many times are you going to see red-faced Bill Self screaming, at the wazoo? It's fun to see him kind of joke around a little bit. So I think that was a very, kind of fun thing. And then also something, very great, I would say, is, the KU Cancer Center and 7 KU men's and women's basketball players are serving as brand ambassadors for a fundraising campaign to fight cancer. And that's going to be, with the V Foundation. That's going to be with Shot Tracker. They're going to play a game and just kind of get the word out there. And those 3 KU men's players are going to be Flory, Badunga, Elmarco Jackson, and Jamar McDowell. So, those tenured guys. And I just think it's just great because people just say, they're getting this NIL bag. They're getting, Shot Tracker's pacing them. They're doing good things with this. And that's what I think kind of gets undervalued. And I'm not saying everyone does this, who knows. But that's just kind of shows the heart and integrity that maybe Jayhawks guys can provide over some other programs. I don't know. These are things that I love to see out of my team, no matter what. Especially when we're not, we're not in season. We're not prepping for a big Houston game. We're not, going on the road to K-State. I like to see these guys kind of do these things. So I've always got it out there. I'm always going to give you some scoops, some hopefully, some hopeful recruits we're getting, some what's going on, some pump up for, the upcoming games because it's getting closer. That tip-off's getting real close for Green Bay. So watch out, Green Bay. We're definitely going to take you game 1. But, I just wanted to thank you guys so much for listening, so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and that's Nick Rondeau bringing at you Jayhawks Daily. Rock Chalk. Go Jayhawks.